Thank you for coming. As the conferees continue to try to work on the fiscal year 2010 budget, I think it's very important for all legislators and all citizens to know the facts about education funding for next year in Mississippi's public schools. For the school year that begins in August, my budget will give our K through 12 schools nearly $200 million more in funding than they have ever received in any previous fiscal year in the history of the state. The funding level for the funding level for the school year 2009 and 10, which is the fiscal year 2010, would be $2.698 billion. The previous highest amount ever before for our schools is $2.502 billion. So this is literally an increase of $196 million more than our public schools have ever received in the past. You can see by this chart that for the last several years we've been stair-stepping up from 2.165, 2.3, 2.5, and last year, the calendar, the school year that just ended, that went down very slightly. This coming year, be 2.698 billion. That's 7.3% higher than any previous year, and about 10.5% higher than this year. When you look at a table that shows where the funding for this year comes from, you will see that down here in my budget is the state funding plus the fiscal year 10 federal stimulus funding for education. But in addition, our schools will get for fiscal year 10 the fiscal year 09 money that we have not been able to send them yet because of having to comply with federal regulations. They'll get an extra $49 million of federal stimulus carry forward, plus $71 million for Title I, $60 million for special education, $20 million for school improvement. All that totals up at $2.698 billion, a record by far. This is important because it comes at a time when state revenue continues to decline. If things go as badly in June as they went in April and May, the revenue shortfall will be in excess of $400 million. That is, we will have a revenue shortfall more than $400 million under the most recent revenue estimate. That's why it's very important for people to understand that we're proposing record spending in my budget for education, despite the fact that revenue continues to come in worse. It doesn't make any sense to add $45 or $50 million extra to my budget for K through 12 schools when we're seeing revenue around $400 million short, and the budget for our schools going forward next year at a rate $200 million higher than it's ever been before. Yet there are some in the House who are asking for an additional $45 or $50 million for K through 12 schools, I guess on the theory that instead of the schools getting $200 million more than they've ever got before, it would make a big difference if the schools got $250 million more than they've ever got before, despite the fact that the state revenue is somewhere between $350 and $420 million less than we thought we were going to bring in. With that, let me take your questions.
Do you think the members of the House know that they're going to get $200 million more, and why would they not agree to that?
This is exactly the reason we had this news conference. is that I came to the conclusion late last week that most people in the legislature didn't really know that under my budget, with the federal stimulus money, that our schools would be getting nearly $200 million more than they've ever gotten any year in the past. And when I bounced that off a couple of Democrats in the legislature, they both were very surprised, told me they didn't know that. That's why we put out the press release this weekend to make y'all aware of it. And since none of you carried it on the news Sunday night or Monday, that's why we had the news conference today, so that they could learn and the public could learn. And look, this is complicated stuff. And people are getting jillions of figures thrown at them, including the legislators. And that's why I think it's really important that the public have good information, and I appreciate y'all's willingness to help the public get the good information.